Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a February 6th edition of the MSP Initiative, MSP Talk. It is February everywhere. And that means that the year is definitely underway. I don't know if you've been sleeping under a rock since the holidays, but 1 month down, 11 to go. And if you haven't been watching your calendars, current events, right? I don't care if our guest for today's podcast is from New Zealand. The Super Bowl, which I think is a worldwide phenomenon, is this upcoming weekend, February 9th. So that's why I got my Eagles gear on for today. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll even get a prediction from our friend, even though he's probably not following it. And then, of course, this upcoming Friday, maybe a marketed, created, artificial holiday, February 14th, Valentine's Day. So we'll talk about those Valentine's Day gifts, ideas, I guess, for all of our tech people out there. That being said, it is again February 6th, 2022. Welcome to the MSP Initiative. MSPinitiative.com. This is where you find everything that we do, including recordings of this very podcast, which we then post onto YouTube and different audio podcatchers, etc. So you can like, subscribe, download, forward from there. We also have what we believe to be our upcoming events for this year. There's a industry calendar all the way in the upper right-hand corner of MSPinitiative.com. And then you'll see some of our intended upcoming block parties around some of the larger conferences in our industry coming up this year, as well as we are still looking to move forward with one MSP Community Live or MSP Community Minds, later on this year, which is our educational event that we do as well, usually here in the States. So I'm not going to take you to the website because you can go figure out how to spell initiative, put MSP in front of it and .com behind it. And you get MSPinitiative.com and there you are. That's all we need to say about that. Welcome to the show, Michael Lawson from hopefully sunny and warm New Zealand and our friends from Couchdrop. Welcome to the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And no, I didn't know the Super Bowl was on. So
yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing. They usually get almost 150 million viewers every time they put this thing on. Is definitely the television event, at least for our part of the world, every year.
we watch ads
What's
as
that?
well. We do watch the ads.
Okay. Well,
But
I'll tell you this: it's more than most things. If you actually Google top television shows every year, the Super Bowl, I believe, is usually number one every year. Again, usually from the U.S. North American perspective, that's more than any other televised thing. Right? Could be what have we had recently? The Queen of England died, and new monarch came in. Right? That was heavily televised. We had the Olympics, right? That's pretty heavily televised, although there's usually a time delay. Even Taylor Swift doesn't bring 150 million viewers at any one point in time. I know Jen will probably spit out her soda as I was saying that behind the screen, but it's true. So it is definitely the preeminent televised event of the year. Of course, some people that aren't even football fans, they watch in for the commercials. I was just watching an episode last night of best Super Bowl commercial of all time. If you were interested in what the going rate for a Super Bowl commercial was this year, it was $8 million USD. So that'll give 30-ish seconds per commercial, 8 million. That's the going rate.
still sound for 100 million viewers.
For 8 million for 30 seconds, that's the going rate. Would you pay that?
Oh, it's a bit steep for us, but it depends who you are. Yeah. I mean, if you've got 140 million viewers, that's a big audience.
Yes, and they definitely get that 8 million per 30 seconds. So just count it up. Fox, who's televising the Super Bowl this year. And then so it'll be interesting. I'll be headed down to see my Eagles play the Kansas City Chiefs in New Orleans. Hopefully all of that goes well and we don't have any travel stories, although they always tend to pop up at the most inconvenient times. So if you follow me on social, for the last, I don't know, since September till now, it's been very Eagles focused, but that's pretty much my jam. But now it'll be Eagles and Super Bowl focused for whatever it's worth. And then, of course, we have the Super Bowl halftime show, So we'll see what everybody thinks and rates that. That's one of the big draws for those non-football fans that watch the Super Bowl this year. But I digress. Valentine's Day, Michael. What did you have in mind? Have you already purchased your Valentine's Day gift for that special somebody?
No.
Hmm.
It's a short answer.
Sounds like I gave you a reminder. So
Yeah, you did give me a reminder. We actually have speaking of public holidays, we had a public holiday here yesterday for what we call Waitangi Day, which is effectively where we signed a treaty with the British in the 1800s. And that it actually seems to trump Valentine's Day because I've forgotten about it completely. And
definitely a artificially created holiday here, by the marketing flower and candy companies. I feel like back in the day here in the States, but unfortunately has taken hold. I'm sure Jen has it circled on her calendar. See, I keep on poking on her, but she's back there saying, "What's going on?" So yeah, well,
I'm gonna race out shopping after this. So.
yeah, for the techie people in your lives that follow this holiday, I wonder what the going gift is from a, usually not, you don't think about technology on Valentine's Day. You think about all the other stuff, right? The stuff that you see once and it disappears, the flowers that go into the vase and then die. Or although one of the jewelry companies here in Philadelphia area where I'm at, they do the gold dipped flower that lasts forever.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's an idea for you. Jen pops in. Actually, not a fan of Valentine's Day. Wow, I wouldn't have called that, Jen. That's good to know. I learned something new today. She says that until the other person forgets to throw something out there. Then she'll be like offended that he forgot, right?
She's not actually a fan until the morning.
Right. As long if the Diet Coke box didn't show up on Valentine's Day morning, she might be upset. Just saying. Anyway, Michael, lots going on here in technology land. Even like, let's even get more specific, MSP land. At the not, I think just about 30 days ago, we saw the long tenure, 10-year run CEO of Kaseya Datto Autotask and the other 37 other companies under the umbrella step down, and they're on a search to put a new person into the chair. Not too long before that, we had the CEO of ConnectWise change hands about what was it? Right before like September, October, November timeframe, somewhere in there. And a lot of the companies that were kind of in the chair waiting to go either into an IPO or to maybe announce a new funding round kind of were put on hold, right? As the market was fluctuating there for the last couple of years. Seems like that is rebubbling up to the top, and we're hearing about that now. Of course, some people already at the top of the food chain are already publicly traded, like Enable, for example. So, I mean, just right there is a lot of change. What are your opinion on any of that?
To be honest, I think change is always good, right? Like if and for a CEO, most of the time it's probably only effective for them to be in a particular role for 5 years, if even that in some cases. So
okay,
unless you're kind of the founding CEO of a company, I think there's always sort of a time frame which you can actually be effective, and change has to be good for these businesses, right? And then I think the knock-on effect into MSPs will be positive.
Okay. I mean, every time,
and maybe a maybe a different thing. Sometimes it can go really well and can be good for an organization. Other times it can really push them to sort of worry too much about the quarters and not look at the longer picture. I would personally probably never look to sort of IPO one of my companies, just because I think it forces you to to lose focus on the long term. But again, and there's a lot of examples where it actually works out really well. And certainly, like, fresh blood is always good. Sure, it's a change, but someone coming in and looking at the business and the market with a fresh set of eyes, I can't complain about that. Like, I think it's that's a positive thing.
Oh,
And
fair, fair.
if it's not, then hopefully they don't last very long and go on.
Give somebody else another chance. Yeah, no, that's fair. I don't disagree with anything you just said. Different look usually brings new ideas. New ideas brings different things that can be implemented. Now, if they work, they don't. You find out. But if you don't do something different and expect the same results, then I think they said that's the definition of insanity, to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result.
Exactly. Yeah.
That being said, every time the top changes, we also find companies like yours and many others from the industry come out of the sandbox where you're like, we found the problem. We didn't find that it was handled or there was a good answer for it, or if it wasn't, the market had an unserved need. And so, a lot of the great companies in our part of the technology realm, I call it the MSP sandbox, comes from people who are sitting in the chair doing the work, I call it the trench work, right? Resetting the passwords and climbing underneath desks and plugging in the cables when somebody knocked that power adapter out of the power outlet and didn't realize it. And actually we're like, it would be really good if somebody had an answer for this, and they find out this didn't have a good answer, and then they build something, and that something turns out into a startup and a company. So not sure of how that maybe fits your story at Couchdrop, but would love to hear why Couchdrop. What was the idea behind it? What was the epiphany that started it all? And how do we get to today?
Well, there is a bit of a story there. So I started another company. Now it's going back, I think probably 10 years. So I started another company which was building network firewalls for schools, actually.
Okay.
And when we exited from that company, I saw another problem, and it was a really stupid problem. It was probably the most ridiculous problem I've ever decided to fix, and that was simply that while you're sitting in network devices or in servers, often you have a need to get files out, and those servers are sitting behind firewalls, behind sort of comprehensive security structures, and they don't have any pinhole access most of the time. And we had a need to pull logs and to pull config files back out basically to the desktop, to something like Dropbox.
Mm-hmm.
So I built Couchdrop to do that, and it was basically an SFTP server back out into Dropbox or Google Drive. And it's probably I have a few side projects, play around with a lot of things in my time just for fun. And this was one which kind of just sort of stuck. And when we exited from Linewise, I decided, hey, let's have a look, let's give this a go and see whether there's actually a real product here. And in the process of doing that, we discovered that people were actually using Couchdrop to perform data migrations, which when you've got SFTP and you've got it going into the cloud, I can understand how people would sort of hack that together to perform migrations, but it was really, really stupid. And generally when you see a product being kind of retrofitted for something else, it indicates that there's something wrong in the market, right? That there is actually a gap there. And so we quickly kind of spun off and built MoveBot, which uses a lot of the sort of underlying technology behind Couchdrop as well, especially in the case of connecting to cloud storage. But it's very, very different in how it actually operates, and it deals with all the nuances that go in behind a migration or behind transferring data between two platforms that really are not the same. So yeah, we did that. It was really, in this case, like we kind of just fell into it. You look at one particular problem and then all of a sudden notice another, and away you go. And there's nothing deliberate about that, or planned about that. It just sort of kind of happened. And there's a lot of weird nuances behind the kind of underlying cloud platforms like SharePoint and Google Drive and Ignite and some of the other are the odd ones that make it pretty interesting and frustrating at times because these companies don't build very good APIs. But that's kind of what we specialize in dealing with now. So
No,
I would
that,
agree with.
it's a very good point, to be honest. I mean, and here's the thing: these migrations happen all the time. I mean, common use case, Michael, that comes right to the top of my head is, hey, one account decides to leave MSPA, go to MSPB. They both have different standards in what technologies they're using. They need to move that stuff from A to B. Your example could be, hey, one's on SharePoint, OneDrive, Microsoft. The other MSP's running Amazon or Google or one of the other platforms. And now, like, they don't necessarily talk natively, right? You got to figure out how to move that. And let's face it, they probably do it the hard way by hand and sit there and watch the transfer go, and it fails, and you got to start again. And then you can imagine the frustration when something gets missed because you found out after the fact that the customer raised their hand later on, and they're like, "Hey, we're missing this folder." You're like, "Uh-oh, didn't make it."
Yeah, they don't notice for months often. So it is actually a real risk for MSPs and or any company doing that kind of move and not using a tool. Because most of the time, you spot check files and whatnot. You'll have a look. Oh yeah, it looks good. You'll ask some people internally what it looks like in the new destination, and they're busy, right? They don't have time to check everything, and it's not until sort of 6 months down the track where you realize, wow, okay, we're missing a few folders, and or there's files here which are actually corrupted. So doing it yourself, while it might seem like the easy solution in some cases, it's a real risk for your customers. So we're biased, right? So obviously I'm not going to recommend you do that. But there are a lot of tricks that we employ and sort of normalization in the data structures that make it reliable, right? We won't lose data, we won't corrupt data. And these systems, none of them play together, right? Like they have no motivation or no incentive to play together. And they also don't, when you think about companies being sort of centered around one, like hypothetically SharePoint, as an organization grows, there's a lot of stuff in SharePoint which doesn't work for certain departments. And so having either multiple systems or realizing as an organization that, hey, SharePoint is not really suitable for 90% of our team who are all graphic designers. Dropbox would be a better choice. And then doing that move it's quite good for the business, right? It's good for us as well, obviously, but normally it really helps increase productivity in the company that's doing the move. So MSPs are in a good position to actually be able to help those organizations go through that transition and pick the right tool. And while Microsoft and Google pretty much own the market, there are some really good other tools out there, like Ignite, which is sort of, just been bubbling away for a while, and now is kind of creeping up and doing some really neat stuff in terms of security, and in terms of how they actually model the data. It's very close to a file system as opposed to, when you go into SharePoint from a file server and kind of go, what is this like? Or you go into Google and it's quite different, but they're taking a different tack there, and it's really quite neat. And then of course you've got Box and Dropbox as well, and there are some other contenders that are bubbling away there too. So I think there's this need to kind of look at, okay, how are we using our data, and then figure out what the best system is a good thing for businesses, and of course this is great for us, right? So
No, I totally get it. So MoveBot and so MoveBot is a product underneath of Couchdrop, right? I mean, that's
Couchdrop is actually a product as well. This
okay.
is one of the pains of starting a company, building a product, and then discovering that there's another gap and building another product. We have two products, and one is called Couchdrop and one is called MoveBot. But we're actually going to rebrand the sort of parent company to Couch Labs very shortly. We just need a
Okay.
logo, a few other things, because the distinction's quite hard, and people, we want to sort of be able to talk about both products at the same time. But if you have come to us for MoveBot, you kind of look at Couchdrop and go, "What? And it's also a product. What's all this SFTP stuff?" And it becomes a bit confusing. But
All right. So just to make it clear for the people who are watching this episode, why would they look at MoveBot? Why would they look at Couchdrop? What are the use cases for the separate products?
MoveBot's really straightforward. It's basically MoveBot is, or we're trying to build the best cross-platform migration tool. So if you have a migration project, it doesn't matter how large it is or how small it is. MoveBot is the tool for that. It does files, data structures, and does emails and calendars and whatnot as well. Really simple sort of pricing, right? It's just usage based. There's no long-term contract or agreement. You just use it and then away you go. Couchdrop, on the other
Can I
hand,
pause you real quick? Would it be with somebody who has used something like Skykick or Migration Wiz, like any, does it compete with those products or not quite?
we do compete with both of those products. So both Skykick and Cloud EM and BitTitan's product, they have a pretty heavy focus on email and sort of workspace migrations. We actually came at it from the other direction, which was we kind of nailed storage first and then got drawn into doing mail and calendars and whatnot. But primarily we came at it from that that storage problem, because that was where the most pain was. It was incredibly difficult to move 50 to 100 terabytes really quickly. That's what we really nailed. So with MoveBot, you can move data incredibly fast. We had kind of the record was, or so far at least, was 1.2 petabytes coming out of Google Drive
Wow.
in weeks,
That was an
which
expensive Google Drive account.
it was. You'd be surprised how much data some companies. Well, it's mostly universities and whatnot that have the sort of big volumes of data. But when Google did the pricing switch on for education, it created a lot of movement there. Suddenly, some of the big institutions realized, holy moly, we have massive amounts of data sitting in the system that we have to get out. So yeah, that's MoveBot. If you're doing migrations, it's kind of your number one tool. The big differentiator for us is that we support everything. So it doesn't really matter where you're coming to or from. We support it. We haven't focused on one particular platform.
Got it. So if I say Microsoft, and of course that means OneDrive, SharePoint. If I AWS, Google, what's the other one that is kind of, well, there's sub platforms underneath of that, right? But you said Dropbox, you said.
And also like S3 storage, Azure Files, Azure Blob, GCS. Actually, we'll do file server to file server migrations as well. Pretty much any
Awesome.
any pathway there, we cover it. And we try and treat them with the same sort of weight, which is normally why people come to us, right? Is that they've found that the existing tool they're using is pretty good. Maybe in the higher end of the spectrum in terms of data storage requirements, it's lagging a bit, but they want a tool that can actually do all of the platforms, and that's a key differentiator for us in that space. And it's something we've kind of built into the system. It's very easy for us to add new players when they come up, and we're doing that pretty frequently. So yeah.
So I assume like this data has to transit to somewhere and then go from somewhere to this end destination, right? Like So where are your servers located? You get to choose, like if, some people have some sort of, I don't know, compliance-based requirement or data sovereignty-based thing where they got to keep the data within a certain region. How does that work?
Yep. Yeah, so you've got basically you can choose where you want your data to reside. So if it's a really big thing in the EU in particular. Most of our customers there have a mandate to keep the data in the EU. So when you set up a project in MoveBot, you actually just choose where you want the data to reside, and it's as simple as that. And then should you have a humongous amount of data, like upwards of sort of 500 terabytes, and you want that data to not actually leave your own infrastructure, we can accommodate that as well. But most of the time, our customers are just using our infrastructure because it's basically point click, right? You don't actually have to do anything, and we don't hold on to the data at all. So it's effectively transit through us, and that's it. And then it disappears. It stays in memory for a couple of seconds, if even that, and then away we go. And it's of course encrypted along the way.
Yeah, that's important. All right. So, and then you said it's usage based. Is it based on total data, transited, or how does the math work there?
It's a bit controversial. It's quite different, right? Because most of the time, migration tools are centered around user licenses. Oh, I keep losing the video. I'm not sure, George, if that's on my end or your end. It's typically, most migration tools are based on user licenses. We've gone the complete opposite way, and it's effectively per gig.
Okay. So if you have
So
the 2.x petabytes, that you just divide that by how many gigs is that, and
yeah, well, if you've got that much data, you should really come and talk to us because the
might
public
work
private
out a deal.
yeah, there'll be a pretty good deal there. But it's effectively that you pay per gig. MSPs get a significant discount if they're on a partner program, which you can just sign up for. And then of course the pricing does scale. So if you know you're going to be doing a few projects over the course of a year and you have a rough idea as to what that looks like, then you can actually pre-purchase at the higher tiers. And the obvious problem with this model is in email migrations, where companies want sort of a bit more predictability. So we actually cap the email migration price at 10 gig. So you won't, for a particular user doing a mail migration, you won't pay more than 10 gig.
I don't know. I've
Which
seen some 100 gig mailboxes out there, especially in Exchange.
yeah,
Um,
there are. But for us, 100 gig is not a huge amount of data.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Um,
So what about what if, like some of the other tools that we mentioned earlier, like they let you do a couple of passes, right? To like get the delta. If there's like, hey, when I started it, there was this much, but then there's some change in between the time you started. Like, so how do you handle that?
we have what you call a delta run. So generally, typically in a migration, you will set it up, run some tests, do a scan across the entire data set, configure everything, configure transfers, and then press play. And that will move the vast majority of the data, but then you run into that sort of cutover problem, right? Especially with emails. So what you can do in MoveBot is just configure constant deltas. And all that's doing is it's scanning the source, scanning the destination, looking for changes, and then remedying them. And that's it. It's nothing terribly fancy, but that means that you can quite acutely control your cutover, and you can actually schedule it in advance as well. So if you've done the vast majority of the transfers, you can come in and say, okay, at 5 p.m. on Friday, I want you to run a delta, and then it will take over the weekend, only pulling across the changes, and then you're good to go on Monday. And you can do this as many times as you want. Like it's really quite quite robust in that regard. You're not going to, if something goes wrong, you're not going to lose everything. You're not going to lose state. It can really just be resumed, or you can run a delta and it will pick up the rest of the changes. And then you can also, to facilitate that cutover, be quite precise in what you're targeting. So you can really choose to bring over data in different stages, because ultimately most organizations are only using a small portion of the data set. And so there's sort of a more important block or set of users or a set of folders under those users that you can actually quite easily target as well. So.
No, that's fair. No, these are all questions that I would just come to the top of my mind when you're talking about this topic. All right, so MoveBot, I like that. It's like ubiquitous. You can go on-prem, you can go cloud, you can go S3, blob, all that jazz. Sounds like it's like a Swiss Army knife of data movement. Includes email, which is great. So you can cover both sides of the conversation, because usually it's somewhere in the mix. There's got to be actual raw data files, videos, folders, and then there's email, which I don't think it's ever going to go away. I know some people are like, oh, the death of email. I'm like, yeah, okay. Maybe not. Maybe.
Yeah, we resisted the urge for so long to build email migrations. It's like, come on, there's so many email migration tools. Why do you guys keep asking for that? Like,
well, unfortunately, they keep getting acquired by other people. That's the problem, I think, for some people. All right, so that's MoveBot. Let's talk about Couchdrop, which I think came before MoveBot. What does that do, and why is it different?
Yeah, so Couchdrop is primarily, it's a couple of different ways to think about it, but it is at its barest form an SFTP server for the cloud. The difference there being with a sort of traditional FTP or SFTP server is that it's fully cloud hosted and it works on top of cloud storage. So if you've got SharePoints, which everyone typically has, you can hook SharePoint into Couchdrop and then upload and download files to SharePoint via SFTP, which sounds very boring and kind of antiquated. But SFTP as a protocol is used quite extensively in business-to-business automated file transfers.
Mm-hmm.
So no one is sitting there with FileZilla uploading and downloading files
You'd be surprised.
Well, yeah, there's always edge cases, but most of the time, what we typically see with Couchdrop is customers using it to automate the exchange of data between partners or in some cases the sort of end user as well. And so take, for example, Salesforce. So Salesforce will allow you to export reports to an SFTP server. That's pretty useless on its own, I would say, but getting those reports into SharePoint or getting them into Dropbox or Google Drive is pretty useful. And so Couchdrop kind of provides, in a lot of cases, the conduit between, a system which supports SFTP as a way to transfer files and something modern like Dropbox or Box or SharePoint.
That's interesting, because you're right. I mean, I'm thinking about all the different use cases. Could be surveillance systems that need to move their files, or archiving data from your primary system to a secondary system, or I mean, I'm just thinking about like FTP, SFTP. It's been around forever.
Yeah, it has. And I don't think it's going anywhere, because it's kind of almost a ubiquitous protocol, and it's secure, right? It's going, over. It's basically SSL encrypted, uses the same sort of underlying encryption technology that SSH uses, which is incredibly robust, and it's super simple to implement against from a client perspective. So, compared to if you're hypothetically Salesforce or 3CX or one of these companies that has an outbound integration with SFTP, integrating with all the different cloud providers just doesn't make a huge amount of sense. It's an incredibly costly thing to actually go and do that, whereas SFTP is a pretty straightforward protocol to work with, and very robust. So
No, it makes sense. So I think part of the other challenge is like when I think about like my journey, right? The first time I thought about TFTP, SFTP, just FTP, I would just think of a generic web hosting like scenario, right? Where I had to take my FileZilla, transfer the files in to upload the web pages, yada, yada, yada. But like, and I know that stuff's still around, right? It's really, honestly, it's still around in that world. Here's a problem. It's not very sophisticated. I think part of the benefit of taking this conversation and overlapping it on top of the more modern storage availability, especially in the cloud, is you get a lot of, number one, cost savings, right? Because sometimes the gig price is pretty cheap when you go to things like Wasabi and other S3 enabled technologies, right? But then two, they're able to give you a bunch of other things that a generic SFTP hosting website doesn't give you, right? Like one thing that comes to mind is like versioning, right? It's like, hey, this file was this, it changed to this, and like if you go and log into the destination, like storage provider, they're like, oh yeah, here's your dates and versioning. Well, that's not usually available on a standard FTP server.
You're not going to get that on a standard FTP server, and you don't. I think the bigger advantage with those platforms is the scalability, though. Like Wasabi is not going to lose your data. I would hope not, right? Like it's yeah. But they've been around for a little bit of time now, so I think now they're not going to lose your data. They it's a hyperscale platform. They can consume petabytes of data under a single bucket. It's going to work. Whereas a single server sitting somewhere, sure, it's backed up and whatnot, but realistically, there's very little resilience there comparatively. Right, like with Wasabi or with SharePoint or any one of these platforms, your data is replicated potentially hundreds of times in different sort of forms and different fragments. So there's very little possibility that you're going to lose it. And of course, you have versions on top, which gives that the added flexibility.
So okay, so how does so where I can see MoveBot is kind of like you use it when you need it, right? Might not be doing a migration project every day. Where Couchdrop, a little bit more, I'm going to need to use this on a consistency, probably. Is what I'm sure there's a lot of use cases, but
It's
like
different business model.
For sure. So how's that structured from a cost basis?
Couchdrop is a subscription model. It's basically a monthly subscription fee, just like any other SaaS platform. It's lower than the cost of a server in 99% of the cases, and we don't typically charge for data transfer unless you're kind of really getting up there and we're noticing. It is purely that sort of monthly subscription. Generally no lock-in or anything like that either. And an interesting thing with Couchdrop in terms of as a business and a product, actually, most of our customers set it up and then almost forget about it because it's just sort of working in the background. It's sort of providing a link between two systems. And so, after you've done that initial setup and config, you just forget about it.
And so I can imagine, I'm thinking where, from the MSP standpoint, right? Like in both of these cases, both products, I'm going to probably have more than one customer. Is the system already multi-tenanted by design, or how does that work?
Couchdrop is not, but we're getting a bit of pull for that. So it's on our radar. MoveBot is absolutely multi-tenanted. And you can, as an MSP, kind of set it up how you would want in that regard. So you can have multiple accounts. Otherwise, most of the time we have, an MSP will have one account and they can have multiple projects underneath that, which normally go to, different companies or service different organizations. MoveBot typically is quite transient in that, if you connect to SharePoint for one particular customer, once a migration project is completed and there's been no activity on that customer, we delete everything basically to sort of ensure that there's no possibility of a security incident there. Which, so you're not going to end up with MoveBot being connected to all of your clients permanently. That's, I think, not something that anybody wants. But it is set up to be multi-tenanted, and it's pretty straightforward to manage
Cool.
that.
No, I totally get it. I agree with you. I mean, I know that there's a lot of like if you go into the Amazon marketplace or the Azure marketplace, I guess you could deploy their version of it, an FTP server, but the reality is that now you're stuck to just that one solution where I can imagine, the pointing multiple technologies to different providers, right? Like I can imagine I'm thinking again, MSP hat, right? Like there might be a need, and tell me if Couchdrop does this, where, hey, I want this data to end up on this provider, but I have this other system that I'd rather park somewhere out. Like that data would maybe it's not as important to me. Maybe I would rather take the cheaper route just for long-term archival purposes. It may not be the same provider underneath the hood.
Yeah, this is actually a key differentiator with Couchdrop. So we have this notion called a virtual file system, which doesn't exist, right? And so it's totally fabricated. You can have one folder which is called SharePoint A, and that's pointed at one particular site and document library in a tenant over here, and then you can have another folder in the same hierarchy at the same level, which is going into S3, and there's no limitation there. We don't store any of your data. It's a sort of a key point with Couchdrop. We're not actually storing anything. It's kind of, we're almost just like a platform layer on top of existing data systems, and that allows you to transfer data between organizations really quite easily as well. And we have some automations inside Couchdrop. We call them transfer automations, which fall into this kind of weird MFT space as far as the market goes, alongside products like Go Anywhere and Progress Move It, where you're effectively exchanging data on a schedule. So you could configure Couchdrop to every 5 minutes, look for a new file over here in this SharePoint folder and move that, encrypt it, and then send it to an S3 bucket or send it via email to someone's inbox. Or you could drop it in another SharePoint tenant. So it's kind of sounds a bit like a MoveBot, but it's not. It's more, okay, we're doing this constant polling, looking for new files somewhere, and then doing something with them and shifting them off somewhere else.
I mean, it's again really powerful because of the flexibility of it. Number one, I'm not stuck to any one provider. I can plug all my different storage accounts in on one side and create my STP accounts on the other, and then decide where things land. But the cool part that you're saying is, hey, like I can do, it looks like it's all part of one, but I actually have different parts plugged into different store. It's actually pretty neat the way that you're talking through it, because it's like the extreme flexibility, especially if back to your education scenario, kind of, it's like, hey, if I decide, hey, I've been pointing my systems to this SFTP, this, moving it around, and I decide, hey, the price just, overnight quadrupled over here, right? I can decide to relocate it and not have to really do much at all, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And from a nuts and bolts standpoint, right? You laughed earlier, like nobody's sitting there with the FileZilla anymore. No, that's not true. I've seen that way too often. Unfortunately, it's still a thing. But the time burn that goes into doing that manually it's a project, right? Like you effectively have subscribed to the answer for that. And I'm sure some MSPs who listen to this are gonna be like, well, this is not an everyday thing. And I'm like, No, you don't understand. If I'm connecting these various systems that they know FTP or SFTP, and I'm just sending it there, now I don't have to go back and reprogram every single one of those systems, right? To go and point somewhere else. It takes time. And number one, if you're not organized and you miss one, it just stops working. And then, as most things in MSP land go, the day that you really need it, you found out that it wasn't working, and that was already too late.
Yeah, exactly. I think MSPs can sometimes be really bad at judging the sort of time sink that goes into certain projects, and
100%.
that's kind of why we build platforms as vendors, right? It's we want to, you know, MSP should be focused on doing what they do really well, and we can take a bit of that pain away and make it really easy. It's also, if you think if you're standing up SFTP or FTP servers for customers for various reasons, there's a big security risk implied with that. Those servers often get forgotten about because they're not a critical piece in a lot of cases, right? They're kind of there for one or two particular use cases, and so they become a pretty decent attack vector, which is something that you can kind of just move to us and remove that risk. I would say entirely.
That's awesome. And again, you decide where your storage provider, right? So like you're not just trying to be your own Amazon, right? You're like, no. You tell me where you want the destination to be. I'm the guy just facilitating the connectivity between the two.
Yeah, we're just a conduit. So again, we don't store anything, which can be a weird concept for people when they initially, come to us and set it up. But it's so much better. Like from my side, I don't really want to be storing anybody's data. Like the risks with that are huge. And there's a lot of other companies doing it and doing it really well. So, we're just effectively connecting the two blocks. You've got this SFTP and FTP block, and then you've got everything else around it, and we just join them together and give you an easy, fast way to do that. So
No, it
it
makes
is
sense.
also a Swiss Army knife, man. Like,
I love what you did. It makes actually, I think this session right here, like I've run into your team and saw the robot, a couple different events, like, but I think this
yeah,
was the like clearest presentation of exactly what is happening. And hope please use this, by the way, because it paints a very good picture. So let me ask a couple of MSP questions as we get towards the final edge of this. So it sounds like so far I got that everything is as you go, no long-term contracts. It sounds like if you get into very large opportunities, there's discounting available. So definitely, raise your hand or else, don't be surprised by the bill kind of thing. And then, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, definitely come and talk to us. And like I think one of my pet peeves in the vendor world is this sort of lock-in that you get. And sometimes it happens before you've actually even had the opportunity to see a product.
100%.
We get it as well, right? Like we're an avid user of SaaS products. I think SaaS is one of our highest expenses as an organization in general, and often you end up, you sort of want to trial. I'm losing my voice. It's too early in the morning. You've seen the software, it looks good, you want to give it a go, but you can't give it a go until you've gone through their sales process, and then you end up being locked in for 3 years to a product that potentially doesn't do the job. So we've gone totally against that mold and are trying to make sure that it's something that you can just use, you can set it up in both cases, and you're only going to pay for it as long as you're actually getting value from that product. And if you're an MSP and you have a lot, you're doing a lot of data transfers or migrations, absolutely come and talk to us because we do offer pretty aggressive discounts and with no commitment effectively. So
I think everybody in the MSP land wishes all their vendors still work that way. Unfortunately, That tends not to be the case anymore. For a large, vast majority, unfortunately. How does support work, right? Like, sounds like your products work, pretty easily. I love the click and go, comment from earlier in this, but if they need help, how does it work? Where do they get it? When's it available? All that jazz.
Yeah, you email us, or so in both products, you can actually chat with us directly. So we have Intercom, which is quite a nice little chat tool there. You can email us as well, and then if things get really hairy, we have escalation paths available for MSPs, where we sort of guarantee a 30-minute response, 24/7, right? So we're a New Zealand company, which is a little bit odd. We do actually have staff in the US as well, and we have not 24/7 coverage completely unless it's urgent and you sort of ring the bell. But we're pretty close to that, so it's it's relatively easy to get in touch with us. We have a Discord, we have Slack as well. You can chat with us, and then if you sign up for our MSP partner program, which again, there's no commitment involved in that. It's you can just sign up. We try and train you on the product, so we take you through an onboarding session and can help your team get up and running and whatnot, and we'll help you through the first migration, and the second, of course. But we try and sort of hold your hand through that first migration if you need it, so that you'll come back and use us for the second one.
No,
So quite
makes sense.
straightforward, actually.
No, makes sense.
Uh,
And
yeah.
then everything is, throw a credit card on, auto, pay at the first of the month kind of thing. If it's a subscription, or if you're pre-purchasing transfer stuff, you just pay as you go.
Yeah, exactly. So put a credit card number in is the easiest way to go. If that doesn't work for your business, which is frequently the case, right? Then we can do bank transfers and whatnot as well. That's all fine. It's all pretty easy. So there are no hoops to jump through when working with us as an organization. That's something that I'm really super aggressive on, because for me personally, being on the receiving end of vendors who do this to customers, it's a pain. It sucks. I don't know why they do it. Why? Yeah, it shouldn't be hard to do business with an organization. When you want their product, it should be really easy.
So
And then
true.
there is an anomaly, especially with the bigger MSPs and the bigger clients. There's often a compliance aspect to it. So in that regard, we are HIPAA. We're audited for HIPAA compliance. We're audited for SOC 2 and GDPR and whatnot as well. And we have a public trust center, so you can actually go on and have a look at how we deal with your data and what we're audited on, and et cetera, et cetera. If compliance is important.
Oh, it's starting, like, it's definitely important, but it's definitely becoming more noticeable. I think as everything
Yeah.
goes, right? You start off small, as you grow, you get bigger customers, then your bigger customers raise their hand, and then you're like, oh, I guess I need to go look into that. And that's usually where that conversation comes up. But I digress. Where do people find out more information about either of these products? Want to learn more? Maybe want to talk to someone, check it out. What's the best place?
Movebot.io, or just search for Movebot or Couchdrop. There's a lot of information on our website, and that's generally the best place to start. Honestly, if you're having a look around, just sign up and have a play. We actually preload with Movebot 50 gig of data. If you want more to play with, send us an email and we'll hook you up. And the same with Couchdrop. So you get a 14-day trial, and then if 14 days is not long enough, send us a message and we'll give you a longer trial. It's really easy. And you can see there's a few videos on YouTube and whatnot of how the platforms work. And I think for Movebot in particular, our marketing team has done a pretty good job of pumping out. There's a lot of white papers and whatnot that are actually pretty high in terms of quality. Like, they really go into stuff in detail. So if you're just generally interested in how we we would recommend you run migration projects, I'd highly recommend having a look at some of that content on the website.
That's awesome. How long have you been in business, and how many MSPs do you think that you serviced so far?
I think now we've been in business for almost 6 years. So we're starting to get a bit scary in that regard. Like
Hey, they say if you can make it past 4, you're past 80% of the people who they don't make it to that point.
yeah, I think the 2 year hump is a pretty serious one as well. As far as MSPs on the platform, I think we're sitting around 3,000 at the moment, so worldwide, of varying sizes, right? Like we have MSPs that are just 1 or 2 people, and then right up to some of the bigger ones, in the world. Yeah,
That's awesome. Wow,
people
you
are.
got you. I was gonna say you built. Yeah, I mean, 6 years in, 3,000 plus MSPs. I think we've proven the idea here, right? And it sounds like, if I had to guess, if you're changing the name to Couch Labs, you probably have a couple of other ideas coming down the pipe. You didn't say it, just guessing.
Yeah. There's a few things kicking around, and that's as you figured out. That's one of the reasons why we are changing the name, because I enjoy building product. I love it. It's what gets me up in the morning, and we have an amazing team in that regard. So yeah, you'll be seeing more from us.
We know you like to drink your Coke in the morning, so we'll definitely keep an eyeball on where that takes you.
Absolutely.
Michael, thanks for jumping on. This was a pretty cool session. I hope rewind this session, guys. 2 really cool. I understand there's some bigger names that we've all seen from a marketing standpoint, but I mean, just the ease of use and how these guys do business. Like, I don't think anyone would disagree. They wish everybody did it this way. And it sounds like they're willing to work with you, which is, other than, does the product work? Is it priced well? Do I have support access? Then it's, how easy is it to do business with these guys? Sounds pretty darn easy. So for that reason alone, it's worth a look. To go to movebot.io or search for Movebot or Couchdrop, and it sounds like it'll get you to the same place. These guys have done a couple of our block parties. I love the robot costume that they have. It's pretty cool. So they came out with a pretty good mascot that's not an animal, right? That seems to be like the trend. Everybody has like some sort of different animal. Nope, we went to robot. I like that. Something different. So we got a couple photos. I was going through some of the libraries as I was in this, and I was like, oh, there they are. I found that robot screen. It's lit up. It's pretty cool. Cool marketing. You guys do a great job. So this session was absolutely recorded. We'll post it on mspinitiative.com under sessions. Real quick, Michael, any events on the top of your head that people will stumble into this year?
We'll definitely be at IT Nation. We are going to be at Google Next as well, walking around. And we'll probably, we'll be around this year. We're sort of still working out all our conferences, but probably MSP Geek as well.
Awesome. Well, looking forward to seeing you guys in person. Thanks for jumping on. Sorry for getting you up early. At least it was 7 and not 4. So at least there's a win there. Don't forget to buy that Valentine's Day gift. You still have a little bit of time. You're welcome for that one. Talk soon, guys. Thanks for watching.